Okay, so we have here the antigen of your Duffy blood group system. Anyway, for the antibody, anti-FYA has been identified from Mr. Duffy, whereas the anti-FYB has been identified from the multiparous na pregnant patient. Okay, it's just a correction for that, for the previous na video kanina. So, again, for the antigen related to your Duffy blood group system, so this is well developed at birth. So, it's being produced here as early as 6 weeks. Okay, so again, the Duffy antigens will serve here as our receptor, primarily for the receptor for the invasion of your Plasmodium infection. So therefore, if the patient would have here negative for your Duffy antigens, so they are most likely they are resistant to your malarial infection or the Plasmodium infection. Because again, ginagamit siya ng mga Plasmodium natin as their receptor in order for them to bind with the RBC membrane, try to parasitize the RBC membrane. So for those na negative, so wala silang receptor and therefore they could not parasitize, they could not enter, they could not bind ang parasite natin or Plasmodium and therefore they could not eventually survive within that one and therefore they are resistant to your Plasmodium infection for those who are Duffy negative na mga individual. Okay, so the antigens also here could only be found in our RBC membrane that could not be found in other blood cells, including your lymphocytes, monocyte, granulocyte, they are absent. But the Duffy antigen could also be found here in the tissues of our body, like your brain, your colon, and your endothelium. Your Duffy blood group system, on the other hand, so that one is being destroyed by our enzyme treatment the same way as with our MNS blood group system. Okay, this one is also shows a dosage activity with antibody. So we have here the phenotype related to your Duffy blood group system. So we have your FYA positive, B positive. Okay, that is most prevalent. Okay, that's most prevalent among your white population. But in your American Black, most likely they are negative for the antigen. So FYA negative, B negative. And then again, what good with being negative, again, they are resistant to your Plasmodium infection or your malarial infection. Okay, we have here the antibodies. So anti-FYA, anti-FYB, consider here to be an IgG antibody. So being IgG antibodies, so basically they are clinically significant antibody and they tend to be responsible here for the hemolytic transfusion reaction. And this antibody shows here a dosage activity and they are antithetical partner to one another. Okay, so we have here the Duffy antigens and their malarial infection association. So again, your Duffy A, Duffy B is a receptor for your Plasmodium vivax and Plasmodium knowlesi. Another one, FYB, is also for the invasion of your P. vivax infection. So therefore, pag negative ka, if you are Duffy null, FIA negative, B negative, so you are resistant to your Plasmodium infection because again, ginagamit ito ang ating Duffy antigen ng ating Plasmodium in order for that to invade your RBC. So pag negative ka, okay, negative ka, problem with the negative ay, of course, although na matuwa ka, resistant ka, so your Plasmodium infection, but of course, you are Duffy negative, so baka ma-expose ka and eventually develop an antibody later on. Anyway, again, among Black population, majority of them are Duffy negative, Duffy A and Duffy B negative. Okay, the next one, we have here the KID blood group system. This is 009 ISBD classification number. So the KID blood group system includes here the antigen, your GKA, JKB, which are your high prevalent antigen. We have also here your KID null, okay, the A negative, B negative. We have also here the JK3, which is a high incident na antigen. Okay, so the antigen of your kid are well developed at birth, and usually they are produced here as early as 11 weeks for your JKA and 7 weeks for your JKB. So your kid na mga antigens are enhanced by your enzyme treatment. So unlike with your Duffy, they are being destroyed with your enzyme treatment. This one naman ini-enhance siya. Okay, for the phenotype, among white population, so pinakamadaming would be your positive, GKA positive, B positive. Asian will also have here, pinakamadami is GKA positive, B positive. For the black population, however, is GKA positive B negative, a majority of the population. Antibody related to your kid is considered to be your IgG antibody, and it's trying to also to show your dosage activity with your anti-kid A, GKA, JKB. Okay, and this one is notorious in the blood banking because most likely it try to be implicated in 75% of your hemolytic transfusion reaction. The problem with this type of antibody sa kid natin ay pag ang blood natin, we try to store that one in the blood bank ref sa blood bag natin, antibody titer tend to decrease in vivo. So pag nag-perform tayo ng antibody panel identification, since mababang level niya nagbumaba kasi in store mong blood, it might be missed by your antibody panel identification. So, sabihin mo, although if the patient would have antibody for the kit, since na nag-deteriorate ang kanyang titer upon storage in the blood bag, in the blood bank, so pag nag-perform ka ng antibody panel identification, so wala kang madidetect na kid na antibody. Pero, dapat meron siya kasi bumaba lang level. Ang problem with that, pag sinalin mo ito sa patient natin, ang kaya mangyari niyan, it would tend to increase ang kanyang concentration once inside the body of the patient. And pag nagkaroon ng incompatibility between the donor and recipient with related to your kid, so it will tend to produce here your hemolytic transfusion reaction. Only that hindi siya agad-agad na namamanifest. So that's more of the H, delayed hemolytic transfusion reaction. So pag may question kayo na like in the exam, if you try to encounter what's the most implicated with your delayed hemolytic transfusion reaction, so you try to answer that one as your kid na blood group system. Okay, so we have also here the next blood group system. We have here the Lewis blood group system. Okay, the Lewis blood group system, we have here 007 ISBD classification number. So the Lewis blood group system is a very unique na blood group system because it's the only blood group system that is not an intrinsic part of the RBC membrane. So basically, this is a blood group wherein the antigens being produced by our tissues. And eventually, that is being adsorbed only on the RBC membrane. Pag sinabing adsorbed, dinidikit lang sa RBC membrane. But it's not an intrinsic part of the RBC membrane. Okay, so this one is in the form of your chemical composition of your antigens, with the Lewis antigen here is a glycosphingolipids. Okay, we have here the inheritance of your Lewis antigens. So there are two genes here which try to interact with one another in order for you to produce here your Lewis antigen and to express and to allow you to convert your Lewis antigen from the Lewis A to your Lewis B. The first one, we have your Lewis gene. Okay, this one could be found here in chromosome number 19. Okay, your Lewis gene, try to code here for the enzyme, alpha 4L fucosyltransferase. We try to add L-fucose to your type 1 precursor in order for you to express your Lewis antigen para makapag-produce ka ng Lewis A na antigen. Para makapag-produce ka ng Lewis antigen, dapat you need to inherit here ito na genotype. Okay, we have your homozygous for the dalawang malaking Lewis or malaki sa maliit, hindi ang dalawang maliit. Pag ang Lewis antigen or Lewis gene mo, Lewis genotype mo is ganito, amorph, dalawang maliit, wala kang Lewis antigen or Lewis A na antigen. Pag wala ka ng Lewis A antigen, wala ka ng Lewis B rin na antigen. Okay, then we have also here your secretory gene. So the secretory gene also try to code here for the production of your alpha-2 L-fucosyltransferase. It's try to add L-fucose to your terminal D-galactose of your type 1 precursor that would be responsible here for the conversion of your Lewis A to your Lewis B. Okay, so kailangan ito ma-inherit mo. Dalawang malaki na secretor, saka heterozygous na isang malaki, isang maliit. Not your madalawang maliit, which is your amorph. Kung ito ang ma-inherit mo, either this one, your Lewis A, that will be converted to your Lewis B. Pero kung uh, ito ang ating na-inherit na secretor na genotype, your Lewis A will not be converted to your Lewis B. It remain as Lewis A lang. Okay, so with that. Example, so you have your Lewis here. So again, this Lewis na genotype would allows you to express your Lewis A na antigen. So pag nag-positive ka sa Lewis A antigen, what you have is Lewis A positive, B negative. Pero kung ito ang inherit natin, what you're going to have here, wala ka talagang Lewis A antigen. So pag wala kang Lewis antigen, so that become your okay, A negative, B negative. So ganun magiging mangyayari ng ating phenotype for that. On the other hand, so like for example, so this is your Lewis here. Again, if this was your genotype for the Lewis gene, then you have your Lewis A na antigen. On the other hand, kung ito ang secretory natin, genotype na dalawa na malaki or heterozygous for the one is the bigger one, the other one smaller, yung Lewis A will be converted to your Lewis B. And therefore, magiging phenotype mo is Lewis A negative, B positive. Pero pag ganitong phenotype, mean to say, your Lewis A is being converted to your Lewis B. At ang antigen, na Lewis antigen na meron ka will be Lewis A saka Lewis B. Pero pag ganito lang siya, Lewis A positive, B negative, ang antigen mo na Lewis is your Lewis A lang. Pag ito siya, negative-negative, so wala ka talagang Lewis antigen. Pero pag ito ang phenotype mo, Lewis A negative, B positive, that mean here that your Lewis A has been converted to your Lewis B. And therefore, what you have na Lewis antigen will be Lewis A saka Lewis B na antigen. Okay, because you have this secretory na gene. On the other hand, for example, ito ang Lewis natin. Okay, so we have a big heterozygous for that and we have also homozygous na dalawang malaki. Your Lewis antigen is Lewis A. You have your Lewis A antigen. So, pag may Lewis A antigen ka, so ito siya, positive ka. Lewis A antigen, positive, B negative. Pero, ang secretor mo, for example, ito, okay, so pag ganito ulit, ano mangyari? Lewis A natin will remain as the Lewis A. It will not be converted to your Lewis B. Okay, and therefore, ano mangyayari? So, Lewis A ka lang, so ito pa din magiging phenotype na. Lewis A positive, B negative pa din siya. Okay, so we have here we're incorporating here the lessons with our ABH production. So we have here the H antigen, the H gene and the secretory gene. Again, ang ating H gene, okay, let's try to code here for the production or the expression of your ABH antigen in your RBC membrane. Nasa RBC membrane natin. So dapat itong ma-inherit natin bigger, okay, hindi yung ganito. Pag ganito maliit siya na H, so ang RBC membrane natin, hindi tayo mag-express ng mga ABH antigen natin. So pag ito ang mga H natin, so bigger H, or even, so that's in the form of ganito, or heterozygous for that, not this one. So pag ganito, again, sa review lang ito sa ating ABO, so pag ito nineret natin na H gene na phenotype, na genotype, then you're able to express basically your ABH antigen in the RBC membrane. Pero pag ganito ang inherit natin, so wala kang ABH antigen in the RBC membrane. Like for example ito, ABH, di ba big siya? So ganito siya. So therefore, the RBC membrane, so may ABH tayo. Same true with this one. This one. Ito naman, tingnan nyo, ito maliit. So we are expecting now you could not express okay, our ABH in RBC membrane, so OH. So, mean to say wala kang ABH antigen. The same true with this one. Okay, since amorph siya lahat, puro maliit, so wala ka din pa ding ano dito. So, pwede natin tanggalin to, mean to say wala kang ABH antigen found in our RBC membrane. For the secretions, ano makikita secretion natin? The expression of your ABH antigen in your secretions is under the influence of your secretory gene. So, dapat ulit, Ang secretor dapat natin ay ganito, homozygous for that or heterozygous for isang malaki, isang maliit. Hindi yung dalawang maliit na amorph. Example for that, so ito. So malaki siya, therefore we are expecting that one na mayroon tayong ABH substance in our secretions. Ito, since maliit siya, so wala tayong ABH, di ba wala? Okay, so here naman, wala din. So ito, wala din. So ito, since may secretor ka, malaki ito, so expect to have here the ABH. Okay, so the ABH substance in your secretions. How about your Lewis? Again, the expression of the Lewis antigen in our secretions is under the influence of your secretory gene saka Lewis gene. Okay, so we have here the Lewis substance in our secretion. So remember, pag wala ka nito, ulit, pag wala kang Lewis, di ba, in the form of your ganyan, dapat, okay, malaking ganyan, isang malaki, isang maliit. Again, hindi dapat dalawang maliit. In the case of this one, so since maliit ito, so wala tayong Lewis dito na antigen. O ito naman, okay, what you have here is may Lewis ka, so Lewis A makikita natin sa ating secretions. Ito naman, since wala ka, so wala tayong Lewis. Ito, meron tayo sa das Lewis A. Ito naman, meron tayong, still meron ka pa ding Lewis dito dapat. Tama ba? Okay, that's your Lewis A pa din. But looking at your phenotype for the Lewis, okay, here, again, so para makapag-produce tayo ng, so, may Lewis tayo, so therefore, meron kang Lewis A, tama ba? Since may Lewis ka, secretor ka, it will convert your Lewis A to your Lewis B. Okay, and therefore, ang secretion natin ay Lewis A, Lewis B. Okay, ito ay para sa Lewis A, ito ay para sa Lewis B natin. Since meron kang dalawa, so Lewis A, Lewis B. And therefore, however, ang phenotype natin ay ano, Lewis A negative, B positive. But still equivalent pa rin ito sa ating process ng Lewis A kaka Lewis B. How about this one? Since dito pa lang wala ka nang sa secretion natin na Lewis because na ito ang genotype mo ng Lewis mo. So therefore, wala kang Lewis antigen. So therefore, negative lahat. Lewis A negative, B negative. Ito naman, so meron ka lang Lewis A, tama ba? However, ang Lewis A natin, hindi makakonvert to Lewis B kasi ang secretor mo ay maliit. And therefore, this one is equivalent to Lewis A lang, positive, B, negative lang siya. Hindi katulad nito, na convert ang ating Lewis A to Lewis B is because may secretor ka na malaki, and therefore, your phenotype is Lewis A negative, B positive. Since dito ay Lewis A ka lang, wala kang secretor, this will remain as Lewis A. This one will not be converted to your Lewis B, and therefore, Lewis A positive, B negative ka dito. And again dito pa lang wala kang Lewis. So, Lewis A negative, B negative. This one, meron kang Lewis, this Lewis A. However, secretor mo maliit, so Lewis A remain as Lewis A. That will not be converted to your Lewis B, and therefore, Lewis A positive ka lang, B negative. Dito naman, Lewis A, meron ka. Okay, so, tama ba to? Okay, we have also here your, okay, another one, you have your Lewis B. Okay, ulit, may Lewis A ka because malaki ito. May Lewis B ka because na-convert siya because of your secretor. And therefore, phenotype mo is Lewis A negative, B positive. That this mean here that you have dalawang Lewis A saka Lewis B. Okay, we have here the Lewis antigen. So, Lewis antigen in our saliva is glycoproteins. But your Lewis antigen found in your secretions, or basically or in the plasma, is your glycosphingolipids. Okay, we have here the transformation, the Lewis antigen as we try to grow up. At birth, what you have is puro negative, Lewis A negative, B negative, magiging Lewis A positive, B negative, transform to become Lewis A positive, B positive, and finally, we have here your Lewis A negative, B positive. Then again, if you have your secretory gene. So, kung may Lewis gene ka lang, wala kang secretor, so hanggang dito ka lang. Okay, nagtatransform siya basically from this negative after 10 days. And if you have your Lewis gene saka secretory gene, you're able to attain this type or phenotype after 6 to 7 years. Okay, we have also here the changes in the Lewis phenotype. Okay, during the pregnancy and during with the patient with the liver cirrhosis. If the patient is pregnant, the patient would have here liver cirrhosis, they tend to decrease the expression of the Lewis antigen, and therefore, ito may expect natin. So, Lewis A negative, B negative sila during these conditions because of the alteration in the lipid components, especially the triglyceride and the HDL level. Okay, so we have here your anti-Lutheran A antibody. Anti-Lutheran A antibody, ay anti-Lewis A antibody is basically that one is an IgM antibody. So this one is not clinically significant antibody. And this is being produced here by the patient na Lewis null, Lewis A negative, B negative. This one is not produced by individual na Lewis A negative, B positive na phenotype, because remember, ang phenotype natin na Lewis A negative sa B positive, meron siyang Lewis A antigen na convert to your Lewis B na antigen. So therefore, it is impossible that the patient we're going to develop an antibody, Lewis A antibody, kasi beforehand, meron naman talaga siyang Lewis na antigen. Kaya ang rule ulit natin, pag may antigen ka na, kahit may expose ka pa sa red cells na may antigen na katulad niyan, it will not eventually be allow you to produce antibody. So, magpo-produce ka lang ng antibody if beforehand wala ka talagang antigen. Like in the case of this one, Lewis A negative, B negative, so wala talaga siyang antigen. And therefore, makapag-produce siya ng anti-Lewis A na antibody. In the case of this one, Lewis A negative, B positive, meron siyang Lewis A saka Lewis B na antigen, so therefore, hindi siya makapag-produce ng anti-Lewis A na antibody. Okay, we have here the insignificance of the Lewis antibody or the Lewis blood group system with a blood transfusion. So, number one, this is insignificant, meaning to say hindi siya ganun ka-clinically significant because number one, the antibody here is neutralized by your Lewis substances. Okay, and another one, so this antibody or the antigen ng Lewis natin, hindi talaga siya part ni RBC membrane natin. So, ina-attach lang siya, ina-adsorb lang sa RBC membrane. Since nilagay mo lang, so pwede mo siyang tanggalin. Mabilis lang siya tanggalin. And therefore, it is not causing here your hemolytic transfusion reaction. Okay, we have here some of your biological significance, the Lewis blood group. So, Lewis antigen serve here as the receptor for your Helicobacter pylori infection or your peptic ulcer. Lewis X is a marker for your Riedstenberg. This is Riedstenberg here is your Aus eye. So that's related to your Hodgkin lymphoma. Lewis A negative, B negative na phenotype individual would have higher chance of developing coronary heart disease. Okay, and then lastly, we have here your, okay, for the major blood groups, we have your Lutheran blood group system. Okay, the Lutheran blood group system, that's your 005 ISBD classification number that includes your antigen Lewis A, Lutheran A, Lu A, Lutheran B. Okay, so basically, the Lutheran gene is being coded in chromosome number 19. Okay, this is well developed at birth. Ang Lewis natin, hindi siya well developed at birth kasi because, di ba, you are producing the Lewis antigen only after 10 days. At birth, you are negative for that. Ito naman, well developed at birth. Okay, so that's when you have your 10 to 12 weeks siya pinoproduce. Antibodies related to your Lutheran, so magkaiba siya. Anti-Lutheran A antibody is an IgM antibody, while your anti-Lutheran B antibody is an IgG antibody, making your anti-Lutheran B, Lu-B, as the clinically significant reactive at 37 degrees Celsius. We have here the phenotype, rare phenotype, the Lutheran null siya because negative for the A, negative for the B na antigen. So there are three modes of the inheritance why the patient would able to have this type of phenotype. Number one, we have here your dominant mode of inheritance. So the dominant is inherited here as dominant And the defect on that is not on the Lutheran gene itself, but rather on the erythroid crapple-like factor. Since ang defect niya ay hindi talaga sa Lutheran gene, so therefore the patient is still producing the antigen. However, the antigen production here very weak siya, pero may Lutheran antigen. And since may antigen siya, we are not expecting the patient to produce an antibody. On the other hand, if the mode of inheritance is recessive, the defect lies itself on the Lutheran gene. So, doon talaga ang defects niya, and therefore, wala talaga siyang pinoproduce na antigen, na Lutheran antigen. And therefore, since wala siyang antigen, so the patient would have here the tendency to develop your anti-Lutheran antibody. Sex link is your X link, so the problem with that's in your XS2 sex link, okay, sex gene, X-linked gene. And therefore, again, this is a defect here na hindi mismo doon sa Lutheran gene natin. And therefore, the patient is still producing your Lutheran antigen, only that your Lutheran antigen is being expressed in a weak or small concentration. But then again, mayroon siyang Lutheran antigen, so the patient will not develop here an antibody, unlike with your recessive mode of inheritance. Okay, so thank you.